About an hour ago, I talked to Yuli Edelstein, and he has been in charge of the world's fastest vaccination programme. I began by asking him how confident he was that that fall in infections and numbers admitted to Israel's hospitals was a direct result of Israel's vaccination programme.
Well, we are facing an obvious reality of fighting, on one hand, the surge in numbers of newly infected, on the other hand, moving forward with the vaccine. There is no doubt that there is a gradually descending scale of severe disease and infection in general of people who got two doses of the vaccine. There are some cases of people who got infected after the first dose, but to the best of my understanding, when they are hospitalized, and we had cases like that, they are not suffering the way they, God forbid, could suffer if it were not for the first dose.
So just to be clear, because obviously this is very relevant to what we're planning in this country, your view would be that the correlation with a fall in hospitalizations is with people who've had both doses? Yes,
we are closely following that, and there is an obvious statistical conclusion that there are very few cases. If I'm not mistaken, last time we checked, there was 0.02 of the general cases of those hospitalized were people who already received 2 doses of Pfizer.
So do you think that Britain is making a mistake in widening the gap between 3 weeks and 12 weeks for this second dose?
Well, I'm not a medical doctor, so I think that what we are doing is closely following the instructions of Pfizer. But from what we hear, I wouldn't bet on 12 weeks, but there is no damage in administering the second dose a little bit later. Though here in this country, we have a wonderful turnout of people who got the first dose. About 96, 97% of them after 25 days already have the second dose. So this is not a challenge we have to deal with.
I mean, I'm not really asking about, I suppose, whether it's safe to widen the gap. It's more about whether it's safe to open society, the economy, until you've had the second dose.
Well, this is something we are learning these days because this coming Sunday will be reopening many fields in our life, part of the education system, trade, even theaters and fitness centers, to those who already got vaccinated. Definitely, I'm not talking about trade or schools. This is not the case, but say theaters, fitness centers, sports events will be open to those who already got vaccinated. So we'll see how safe it is. We can't tell. I think it's the first and only time in the world that we'll see it in real life. So I guess in a couple of weeks from now, we'll see how much of the risk we are taking these days.
And just to be clear, in order to go into a gym or some kind of social venue, you'll have to prove that you've had the vaccine. How do you prove that?
We as of tomorrow, will enable people to load down an application on their phones, and those who are, for this or that reason, unable to do that, will have a possibility to print a certificate. And I sincerely hope it works well. To tell you, I'm not worried about this whole thing. It's a huge logistical operation. But having said that, I think that the very fact that we vaccinated with 2 doses, more than 2.5 million people in this country, enables us to talk about opening theaters or fitness centers or sports events, something that without the vaccination, we wouldn't be even dreaming about opening.
I mean, in this country, the idea that you would have to show proof of vaccination before going to a theatre is quite a controversial one. Is it controversial in Israel? Are people resistant to this idea of what we're calling vaccine passports?
Well, there are some who are resistant to this idea, but we do have to keep in mind that it's temporary measures, and we're not going to keep it like that forever. In some areas, I have to say, like in hotels, for example, we'll be using the same green passes, but we'll add corona tests just because of the very simple fact that children under the age of 16 are not being vaccinated, and definitely no one thinks that you can tell a family that is going to finally get a vacation in a hotel, please leave the kids home. Probably some parents would enjoy the idea, but you can't have it as a policy of the country.
Now, obviously, international travel can't really reopen unless there's a proper system for evaluating who's had a vaccine. What sort of talks are going on between, for example, your government and our government on this sort of issue?
Well, we would love to have these agreements. In the meanwhile, we have one agreement signed by our Prime Minister and Prime Minister of Greece. I think that we are talking about opening the borders to mutual tourism of those vaccinated somewhere in April, if things go well. We are talking to different other governments. In the meanwhile, without any practical results, I sincerely hope that we'll be able to open our borders to British tourists too. I understand that in your country, the vaccination is moving forward pretty well. So I sincerely hope that by holiday season, it will be our mutual interest to open the borders with the so-called green passports.
And as you say, people will have to prove in order to travel that they've had a vaccination. Just when it comes to rates of vaccination, I mean, you've had an extraordinarily rapid rollout, but how are you putting pressure on those who haven't had a vaccination to go ahead and have one now?
In the very beginning of this whole operation, I said loud and clear that there will be no obligatory vaccination in Israel, and there will be no measures taken against those who are not going to get the vaccine. Having said that, we are encouraging people to get vaccinated. It's their best interest, in my view. And as we just discussed, we are opening at this stage certain sectors in our life to those who are vaccinated. Once again, not because I want to punish someone, but for a very simple fact that when I have, say, 300 people in a theater hall, at least I know that there is little chance that many of them are carrying the disease.
And we're almost out of time, unfortunately. One very important question. The United Nations has criticised your government for not doing enough to vaccinate Palestinians, particularly in Gaza and the West Bank. Why aren't you doing more?
Well, we are closely cooperating with our neighbors, including the Palestinian Authority. I don't think that we could start with vaccinating the population of Judea and Samaria before offering the vaccine to Israeli citizens, but we did make sure that their medical teams are getting the vaccine. I personally approved these measures. As far as the continuation of this whole operation is concerned, we will be following the developments.
All those workers who come from the West Bank into Israel, I mean, by not vaccinating those people, you're actually putting other Israeli citizens at risk.
Absolutely. A very good point. We are seriously discussing that these days, and I sincerely hope it happens. My position is that we have to do that because, on one hand, as you said, they are part of our population practically every day. And the second thing is I want to promote coexistence and cooperation. In this particular case, you're talking about people who are coming to work here, some of them for many years, and it would be a very good idea to vaccinate them. I hope they react positively to that.
Minister Edelstein, so nice to see you. Thank you very much for joining us, and I hope you'll come back soon.
Thank you so much for the interview.